Okay, hello everybody. My name is Alex. So before we start, I would like to start with simple questions. How many acts can you remember from this morning? Just give it about 1, 2 seconds. Okay. So I think some of us probably remember one or two. Some maybe none because we don't have any coffee yet. But before arriving at this venue today, we probably see hundreds of acts, right? From our social on the car visiting this venue, and countless digital touch points here. And that raises an interesting dilemma. Why there's so many acts today, but it's so hard to remember a few. And that raises an interesting problem, right? Because for Medical, I think the problem is not our distribution. I think we solved it. Today we can reach almost any audience at almost any scale, across almost any channel. The real problem is attention. So let's look at what has happened over the past few years. Okay, so as I've done my research, I combined this table for you guys all to take a look. The overall message here is quite simple. We have global advertising spend continue to increase, programmatic ad buying also continue to increase, and AI has dramatically accelerated content production. But the problem we have here is that also from the government and human research, they found that only about 30 to 35% of viewable digital ads are actually seen. In other words, that because an ad is viewable, it does not mean that it is seen. And also, world advertising revenue estimated approximately $250 billion of advertising globally investment is wasted every year because an ad fails to capture meaningful attention. And as I've done this research for this presentation, I found something very interesting from Kantar Media report. They also found out that consumers are more likely open to an ad and more receptive to an advertisement on particular media channel like DOH, cinema, newspaper, and events. So it's not always best to focus on social or TV streaming like a popular channel, but because like for most users like us or for myself, we go there to be connected and to be entertained, not to see an ad. And so what's happening in the current advertising landscape, attention more valuable than ever. And based on this popular study from MMA and neurons, we also see that when we run an advertising campaign, we have less than 0.4 seconds for the ads to make the meaningful cognitive impact. In other words, that within that 1 second window, if the ad does not catch the attention of the user, you lose them. And here we can see it more clearly, is that in this example, right? For example, when we do scrolling on TikTok to 2 a.m., we rarely remember anything. Again, when we sit in a taxi, getting through here, we see hundreds of cars, but that does not mean we remember any of the model. Only when we active listening and process information, like you are hearing this, stage right now, either you listen to me or you scroll through the phone. So the attention becomes extremely important. And how do we solve that? How do global brand do it? For global brand, they have been doing it quite differently. So instead of looking only at media metrics, they also have started shifting their budget and focus on two models such as premium environment, contextual advertising, and attention. And they have seen that their ROI, like Big Value Unilever, has seen an ROI up to 20%. So that back to the questions. If digital world is like a forest without a map, we usually get lost or we get confused. And as a manager, we all know that no channel solves everything. Here I also have a table for you guys reference, right? Each channel has a specific purpose, and our job is to find out which channels work best. Not about like what channel should we use, but what purpose each channel has. And here, as you can see it clearly, as someone who I work in the advertising industry and as a marketer working over decades, I also come to this realize, right? As a marketer, I one have the biggest budget, or the most rich, or the highest frequency. So what makes them success? They actually consistently have four characteristics: is relevant attention, trusted environment, strong contextual alignment, community validation. And it's all created through a combination of attention, trust, and relevance. So that led us to the reason why we're all here in this room today. How our advertising or how the strategy convert a responsive user into a real client. And essentially, as someone who has been in the market for over 20 years as a global advertising platform, we believe that advertising should not interrupt, but it should earn attention. And we do this through a series of questions. How do you capture consumer attention? How do you deliver smart performance while you be sure that they trust you? And we do this through three levels of impact, but of course today I'm not talking about initiative, but we're talking about our own experience. Because saying all of this is relatively easy, executing at scale consistently is always much harder, and I think we all know that when we run a campaign, right? So when we talk about execution, we talk about that. Hello? Okay. Let's continue, right? So when we talk about execution, we talk about modern programmatic buying solution like DV360 allow us the core media infrastructure. We're talking about audience targeting, inventory exchange, YouTube, partner exchange. But the problem with all of this, the execution is usually very difficult, especially when you do it at large scale. As a Vietnamese consumer, and also as other speakers mentioned, we love all these moments, right? About soccer, about sale, or talking about the weather when we have nothing else to talk about. So our strategy involves about this moment in order to capture people's attention. But when we come to execution, it becomes extremely critical. That's why all of these solutions, they will start shifting forward, like hyperlocation, contextual advertising, report, and optimization. So let me show you what it looks like in practice. Let's take a symbol of the automotive industry. Traditionally, automotive industry rely heavily on audience targeting. Like we identify someone who might be interested in a car, then we serve as them across different environments. And here you can see, right? But when we shift forward the contextual advertising, it creates a different, interesting way of thinking. Instead of asking who might be interested, we shift the question to what are they actively interested right now. For example, someone can read a review on Auto Fun or Auto Pro, or they're searching for a dealership, reading the review and comparisons. So as you can see, all of this can be done through DV360. And let's take this concept a little bit further. So after we have determined the contextual advertising that works for them, because contextual often reveal the intent of the audience better than audience data alone, we can also launch it at a micro-market level. Because the problem, one of the challenges we have is not only about finding who might be interested in a vehicle. The next challenge is about who can most likely take action. So for dealership or automotive industry, it will evolve around we can offer radius targeting around dealerships, city or district level budget allocation, different creative by location, or exclusion of non-serviceable area. So the point here is not only to find auto intenders, the key point here is to find someone who most likely to visit the dealership, because location makes the conversion, right? So we see that. After we've done that, and hyperlocal has performed so much better, and this is also the power of hyperlocal activation and advertising. It leads to about 30% higher CTR, 42% better VTR, 28% better viewability, and 31% lower CPA. And that's extremely clear. The ads is not simply good. Useful advertising perform better because when relevant context align with intent and validation layer on the open web, and it's where we can catch a lot of users with high intent. For example, right, when we see something on social, we will do our research, we will review articles, and we also looking for validation to compare, like to persuade and compare our own opinion. And that is where the open web can catch a lot of this attention. As I often say that with the client is that the open web is not a cheaper alternative to social, it's a critical final step, because ultimately it's where people consolidate, people evaluate, and it's where a lot of project decisions are ultimately reinforced. So let's look at a real example for education. So anyone of parenting? Okay. So anyone of parenting will know that parents don't buy based on the advertisement. They usually buy on trust, especially when it involves their children. For this summer camp, the challenge wasn't visibility. The challenge was credibility. So instead of focus solely on promotional messaging, we shift the focus on premium environment and contextual discovery moment. The result, let us number 6 for itself, we have about 44% lower CPA with a year-on-year growth of 227%. And another similar pattern that I also noticed is in the finance category. Because finance reply is mostly trust-driven, right? We don't immediately buy any financial product. The moment we see the ad, we seek reassurance, we compare, we evaluate with our friends. And also the strategy is quite simple. We just use strong contextual payments, high intent audience, and data-driven targeting. The result, we have generated over 1,262 qualified leads for this campaign, and with over 2 billion in loan value. So the key takeaway here from this is that trust-driven environment usually outperform poor targeting strategy, because when people trust you, it makes them want to buy you and stay with you longer. And so when we run a campaign like this in advertising, trust will become a performance metric. Okay, but let's not stop there. There are also another thing why I think the open web is important. When we run the campaign, we usually focus on metrics like leads, click, conversion, because it's easy to measure. But you know that some of the most valuable effect of advertising usually happen before a consumer takes action. And that's exactly why we want to understand it. And we have partnered with Freeland for this case. So usually when study can be difficult to execute, take a lot of time and also expensive. So what we have done, we have run an in-platform random study within the campaign ecosystem. So it allows us to study the effect of the advertising without interrupting the user experience. And the result is very encouraging. So what we have is for the ad recall versus the control group, we have about 74.9% in ad recall. So it means that, and this one exceeding the industry benchmark. But what I find even more interesting is that we can also have 24-point brand association. So it means that from this advertising campaign, we will also associate the brand name with the campaign core message and value proposition. So the